Good morning, everyone. It is Friday. It is Friday. It is Friday. If you have been living a world in a world that's anything like mine, you've had an extremely busy week and you are grateful to see Friday roll around on that calendar so that you can unwind, relax, and get back to it next Monday. But before you unwind, we're going to have a little chat. We're going to talk about really being ready for the help that you know you need. I want to talk about this subject because what I find more often than not is that the success of a communications campaign and the work I do with my clients really is dependent upon if that client is really, really ready. A great way for you to see if you're really, 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 really ready is to start with my needs assessment, which you'll be able to find down below. But today, what I want to do is I want to actually spend some time going through some of the high level pieces of this needs assessment so that you and your organization can make the next best decision for you all. Because I always tell people this, it doesn't help anyone if you're not getting the help that you need, right? Because each organization is different. So let's talk about it. I also want to take a moment to share something that I've been working on. If you're anything like me, you probably usually have a million tabs open. I learned that you should have no more than 2 tabs open. And I am always breaking that rule. So I'm working on it today. So I just closed some tabs down so I can be 100% focused and present. All right. So let's get into this nonprofit needs assessment. So the very first thing you want to have is programming. Okay. We cannot communicate what you're doing if you're not doing anything. And I know that probably sounds a little harsh, but the reality is the very first piece you need is programming. A lot of times people make the mistake of saying, oh, we need a grant before we do anything. But a lot of times, as a nonprofit, people will work with you and make it so that even if you do have to spend out of pocket, the amount can be very small. As a nonprofit, remember, start small and start cheap because the goal is to demonstrate that you can do things and that you can have an impact in your community. Those 2 things will actually help you get to the next level of the needs assessment. So, when we do our needs assessment, the one thing we want to make sure you have is programming. And the reason is if you don't have programming, it's really hard for us to communicate on a continual basis. We may be able to communicate well for about a month or two, but eventually, if the content runs dry, and it looks like I have a sneeze coming here, so excuse me in advance. If the content runs dry, then we won't have anything else to talk about. And it's important that you're active in the community, even if that means partnering with other organizations to get done what your mission is as a nonprofit, just to demonstrate that you're currently active in your community. That's going to be extremely important when it comes to a communications consultant like myself. All right. So, what's the next piece of this? The next piece of this is grants, right? And a lot of people do that backwards. They expect to get grants before they've done anything. And anyone who's ever gotten a grant can tell you that a lot of grants come from activity. People want to see that you have a sense of ingenuity. They want to see that you're willing to make something out of nothing. They want to work with people who are resourceful. They want to work with organizations who are resourceful. And so that's why programming has to be number 1 on your list. And then grants have to be second on your list. And the reason why that's important is because communications consulting is not cheap and it's an ongoing retainer service. And what that means is you're going to need to have funding in place to cover it. And this isn't something that you should be paying out of pocket by any means. This should be a part of your overall operational budget. So if you're in the process of hiring a communications consultant and you don't have a grant, I'm going to go ahead and tell you to press on those brakes because this is not for you yet. You need to do more groundwork, build up your team, make sure you have the right things in place. Okay, the next piece is communications. So now that you have your programming in place, you know exactly what you're doing. You can demonstrate impact through numbers. You can apply for grants. You're winning grants. You're winning grants year after year after year. Your reporting is clean. You're doing all the right things. Now we can talk about communications consulting. So let's start by explaining what it is because it can include a lot of things, and I typically customize it based on my client's needs. So, all encompassing communications consulting includes social media, community engagement work, and media relations work all together. Um, the mesh up and the needs may be different depending on the client I'm working with. There are clients that I only do social media with. There are clients that I do social media outreach and email marketing with. It all just depends on your business's individual needs. And the reason why I created it is because I believe in nonprofits, quite frankly. I believe that nonprofits can really stand in the gap for people who don't always have access to the money, the relationships, and really want to better themselves, but don't always have the know how, or I won't even say the know how, but don't always just have a way. You know, some things can't be accomplished without money. So, really being able to work with a group or work with an organization that can give them the tools to succeed is extremely important. And I see my dog wants to play. We're going to make him wait until I finish the live. Not right now. So, um, once you have your communications consultant in place, I want to talk about um, who this is typically best for. And so we've talked about that a little bit already, right? You want to have your programming in place, you want to have your grants in place, but you also want to have a team in place. Typically, most of the clients I see that do extremely well with this are in the process of scaling up their team. They typically tend to have at least 3 team members, and I typically recommend an operating budget of 250K or more. And that's just what I recommend. Now, are there certain circumstances when clients come to me and it works? Yes. For example, maybe you get a grant particularly for marketing and communications, then that might work. But typically, those are the general guidelines. If you don't have programming, if you don't have grant funding, it's typically not for you yet, right? You got to work your way up to this. And every organization needs a communications consultant eventually, but you do not need social media or communications to get started as a nonprofit organization. And let's talk about the end results. What does it look like once you are under my wing? We're working together. There are 3 things I like to see happen for my clients. The number one thing I like to see is brand clarity within the team. And this is probably the most underrated piece of the work I do because everyone loves to talk about social media and metrics and reach and engagement, and those things are wonderful. But I'm going to tell you something. Where the rubber really hits the road is when each member of your team and your board can go out into the world, and when your organization's name comes up, everyone is saying the same thing. Everyone is saying the same thing. What does that do for your organization? Is beyond social media, there becomes an intense brand clarity, and with that brand clarity, your organization is really able to break through barriers faster, to build relationships faster. Because guess what? Everyone you talk to is now talking to one another, and they're all saying the same thing. And when there's no confusion, decision making is easy. And so, what you want to do is you want to make it easy for decision makers to decide that your organization should be involved. And that's one big part of what we do that I will say people don't always talk about because it's not always apparent, and that is the buildup that happens over time. Now, the exciting stuff that people love to talk about is our metrics. People typically see about 3 times reach in 3 months or less. I've seen it happen in as little as 1 to 2 months, just depending on the client and depending on the content we create. What makes an immediate impact for most of our clients are the graphics. Most of our clients, when it comes to the graphics, they are using brand colors. And there's a way that we like to use your brand colors so that they really pop off the screen and grab people's attention. The other piece of that is going to be the engagement. And so clicks. Clicks are super huge for us, especially on a platform like LinkedIn, where you have the attention of your politicians, your local government, you have the attention of additional partners and executive directors and program managers. And those are the people who you want to see your organization as well, beyond clientele on networks like Facebook or Instagram. And the main reasoning behind that is that those are the people who may give you access to additional grant funding. They may provide you with opportunities for programming and so on and so forth. And so it's important to have this full spectrum approach when it comes to having a communications consultant. And that's the exciting work that we do. When it comes to clicks, typically it's about 1.5 times. So 1.5 times clicks is what our clients typically see. That's within 3 to 4 months. Generally speaking, I typically like to see it around the 1 to 2 month mark. And so my goal is, hey, 3 to 4 months, absolutely positively. But typically, what I've been seeing recently, currently, in the current state of the algorithm, which we know always changes, is about 1.5 times within about 2 months. And that's your end results. And the goal for us is to steadily increase your followers, and not just increase them, but increase them with the right people. One of the things we do in our monthly analytics report is we make sure that the followers you have added are not shifting your demographics in a negative way. Here's what I mean. If your organization targets mostly women, we want to make sure that when you gain 50 followers in 1 month, that they were women, and at least 80 to 90% of them were women. And that tells us how well the content is actually performing, because we don't just want you to grow followers, we want you to grow impact in your intended area of impact. And that's why it's so nuanced in the way that we create strategies for our clients, because it's not just about growing vanity metrics. We want to grow them in a way that's going to be impactful and that's going to work on the long run. We want to see a good, strong trajectory of your online community and network building up over time and being able to share what you do with their network and so on and so forth. Some typical questions. How long does it take for us to get started? Typically 6 weeks. And I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. Now, 6 weeks probably sounds like a long time. 6 weeks is a long time. But what I can tell you is the reason why we're able to get the results in 1 to 2 months is because of the 6 weeks we spend. We typically try to get your first post up in about 3 to 4 weeks, just because we know the 6 week time frame is long. It just means that you won't have your regularly scheduled posts. So if you have 4 posts a week, you may only get 1 post per week for the first 2 weeks, just until we can really build out and get ahead of your content calendar, because we like to be at least 4 to 6 weeks out when it comes to content calendars, which is why it takes about 6 weeks for us to create your content and get you scheduled regularly pumping out content. We typically work with our clients for a minimum of 6 months. Typically, most of our clients, after 6 months, they are ready to go and ready to ramp up. What other questions do people typically have? Do I need a photographer or videographer? No, I typically guide my clients through how to capture content so that it is able to be used on social media. And I never expect your content to be perfect. And quite frankly, it doesn't need to be. If you look at any trending social media content, you'll know that unfiltered content is actually doing better right now. People are over filters. They want to see what's real. And so a lot of times what you consider to be your terrible piece of content, people actually appreciate it because they feel like you didn't work too hard to get it and that they're getting the raw, real you. Let's see, what other questions do people typically have? And I just want to check to make sure I'm not missing any questions. Okay, good. Um, typically, oh, another question that we often get is how much work do we have to do as a nonprofit? So, my monthly cadence with my clients is a strategy call and a social media report. Typically, I like to give you the social media report the first week of the month for the previous month. And then we do our monthly strategy call sometime around the second or third week of the month for the next month. And the goal is for us to always be in step with what you have going on. The only thing we ask is that you keep us aware of what's going on in your organization so that we can amplify the exciting things you're doing, like awards and grant awards and things of that nature. And then we also like to see your individual team members get engaged. In the very beginning of those long 6 weeks, we do what we call listening tours. And during that time, we ask your staff how involved they want to be in social media. And so we'll know whether whether your staff is a 7 out of 10 or a 3 out of 10, and we will proceed accordingly. We will not harass them, we promise. What happens when someone jumps in, right? What happens? Okay. So early on, we just want to understand the team, the organization, our role, because sometimes there is an existing communications director in place. And so we just want to make sure that we're not stepping on any toes. We really seek to synergize with your team. We don't want to come in and cause issues. We want to come in and for your team to feel like we are a resource. And so we really just want to come in and start to build those relationships. From there, we start to understand your organization's financial goals and brand awareness goals. And then from there, we go into some of the demographic studies just so that we can match you to the appropriate platforms. And then from there, we're posting content. And so that's the typical process. If you have any other questions, you can reach out to me. What I'll say is what's a little bit different about us is we typically do like to focus on a wraparound approach. And so, in addition to social media, if we see opportunities that we think make sense for you from a partnership perspective, we will make introductions to you. And we really try to make our client list a family of its own so that you all know not only do you have me to reach out to and my team to reach out to, but you also have my other clients to reach out to who can be a help as well. I honestly think that's it. I think I've covered everything. I don't see any questions, which means I'm doing an amazing job. And so, if any of this made you wonder, are we really ready? If any of this gave you pause, I encourage you to take the nonprofit needs assessment. It costs you nothing. And the beauty of it is you can take this assessment to your team. You guys can go through it together and you can look at your results together just to understand where you all stand and what things you all need to work on. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. I hope you get some rest this weekend. I hope you keep 2 tabs open all day long. It's going to be tough for me, so I know it's going to be tough for you. And I hope that you get some rest, some time with your family, because you guys work so hard in that nonprofit space. So make sure you are taking care of yourselves before you can take care of your community. I'll see you guys next week. And